Okay. We're now going to bring up the proponents. Franklin Guzman, attorney, National Center for Youth Law. Elizabeth Calvin, senior advocate, Human Rights Watch. Mary Butler, president-elect, chief probation officers of California. Here. Dion Wilson, outreach crime survivors for safety and justice. And they said there was one more person whose name, Dion. Okay. Thank you for being here today. You have about 45 minutes. I would 30 minutes, and then we'll have 15 minutes for questioning. So,
good morning.
However you want to break it up.
Thank you very much, Chairman Jones-Sawyer. Thank you, Chairwoman Hancock and committee members. I am Elizabeth Calvin, a senior advocate with the Children's Rights Division of Human Rights Watch, an organization that investigates human rights violations and challenges governments to protect the rights of all persons. I am here in support of the Public Safety and Rehabilitation Act of 2016. This act is about building avenues for rehabilitation. It is about making careful, considered decisions regarding children and youth. But its most essential element is a contribution to public safety. Virtually everyone who goes to prison will get out at some point. There are three ways that they can return home. The same way they went in, worse off, or better. For years, California has ramped up punishment to the exclusion of rehabilitation. We know that just locking up people does not make for safer communities. By emphasizing rehabilitation and fair individualized decisions, the state can build public safety. On the front end, this act would change how the state makes the decision whether to send a child to the criminal system. It is a decision about whether to focus rehabilitative efforts on a young person or give up. At the back end, the act would create incentives for adults who are in prison to work hard and choose a different path in life. It proposes three specific reforms. First, it allows parole consideration for people convicted of nonviolent offenses, incentivizing involvement in treatment and education. Second, it authorizes the California Department of Corrections and Rehabilitation to award credits earned for good behavior and rehabilitative achievements. These two pieces are important because under current law, determinate sentences ignore the person. Determinate sentences ignore what happens in prison. A determinate sentence means that someone will be released on a set date no matter what. There's no requirement to participate in programs. It is simply a sentence to be warehoused. If passed into law, this act would send a clear message to people in prison. Work hard, participate in programs and education, change the trajectory of your life, and you can earn a chance to be paroled. The result will be people returning to communities with the tools needed to be successful. The third reform envisioned by this act requires that judges, not prosecutors, decide if a youth is to be tried in adult court. California excludes some youth as young as 14 from the juvenile justice system. There is no single more important decision that the state makes about a child than whether to send him or her to the adult criminal system. Juvenile court holds young people accountable, but also provides age-appropriate services. Every youth in the juvenile justice system is required to participate in education and treatment. When youth are tried as adults, they are treated as adults, and they face adult prison terms. A decade and a half ago, Californians were told that transferring more youth to the adult system would make their communities safer. The opposite is true. Extensive research indicates that transferring youth to the adult system has no deterrent effect, and many studies have found that transferring youth to the adult system actually increases recidivism. California is just one of 15 states that permit a prosecutor instead of a judge to make that transfer decision. In the vast majority of cases in California, it was a district attorney who made the decision. Since 2003, more than 10,000 youth have been sent to adult court in California. This act would put that decision in the hands of a judge and mandate careful decision-making, a process that weighs factors about the crime, the youth, and rehabilitation. We either believe that people can change or we don't. If we believe people can't change, they can't grow, can't mature and learn, if we believe people are irredeemable, then maybe it does make sense to just lock up people who commit crimes and not think about who they will be when they get out. But science, common sense, religion, moral thought, and near universal experience tells us that most people's lives are unfinished stories. We support the Public Safety and Rehabilitation Act because it would make much needed reforms to California's justice system.
Thank you. No clapping.
Thank you, members of the Assembly and Senate Public Safety Committees, for giving me this opportunity to share my remarks with you today. My name is Frankie Guzman. I'm a staff attorney at the National Center for Youth Law, and I strongly, rather wholeheartedly, support the Public Safety and Rehabilitation Act of 2016. The decision to send a young person to the adult system is a serious decision with long-term and negative consequences. The decision should be made rarely and only after careful consideration by a judge trained in adolescent brain science and juvenile justice best practices. If passed, this act would make important changes to California law, restoring judicial discretion in decisions about whether youth should be tried in juvenile or adult court. This initiative will require juvenile court judges, rather than prosecutors, to consider how children are different than adults. It would also require prosecutors, rather than youth, to show that a youth is not amenable to treatment in the juvenile system and should be transferred to the adult system. Extensive research shows children are less culpable for their actions and have tremendous capacity to grow and to change, a capacity that is wasted when youth are sent off to adult prisons. The research also shows that people handled in the juvenile system are more likely to thrive, while those sent to the adult prison are more likely to commit new crimes. California prosecutes nearly 1,000 youth in adult court every year. In 2014, 80% of these youth were placed there at the sole discretion of a prosecutor, with no transparency, no guidance, and no judicial oversight in a process called direct file. Meanwhile, serious juvenile crime is at record lows. But every single one of these youth deserves a careful, thoughtful process by a neutral decision maker, free of considerations of political consequences. If passed, this act would improve public safety by requiring trained judges to decide whether a youth should be prosecuted in the adult system. Restoring this judicial discretion and due process means creating more opportunities for young people to receive treatment in the juvenile system while ensuring that we do not fill our prisons with children that do not belong there. The Public Safety and Rehabilitation Act is important to me for both professional and personal reasons. As an attorney, my work focuses on reducing the harmful practice of prosecuting children in California's adult system. Youth sentenced in the adult system receive little to no education or rehabilitation. I advocate for youth to get the developmentally appropriate treatment offered in the juvenile system because without it, they are likely to fail. I know this personally. When I was 15 years old in 1995, before direct file, a friend and I robbed a liquor store with handguns. We were arrested and received hearings in juvenile court where a judge decided whether we should be transferred to the adult system. After a hearing, a judge decided that I should be kept in the juvenile system. The judge acknowledged that I was young, had some growing up to do, had made a big mistake, and that I should be held accountable. But the judge decided that the best way for me to become a productive adult was treatment in the juvenile system. The judge sentenced me to the California Youth Authority. There, I received the education and treatment that I needed. When I was released, I had the opportunity to go to college and then to law school. I thrived later in life, in part because I had a chance to be in the juvenile system after a fitness hearing. My friend, however, was not so lucky. He was removed from the juvenile system and sent to adult court. He was sentenced to 7 years in the adult system, and his life spiraled down from there. He did not get the rehabilitative or education opportunities that I received. I know how much we both needed direction and help. I got it, he did not. In the years since prosecutors were given sole discretion to prosecute youth in adult court, there have been thousands more youth who, like my friend, got no direction and no rehabilitation. However, unlike my friend, these youth's futures were decided by prosecutors behind closed doors without the due process protections that we received. It is time for this injustice to end. Today, my work focuses on ending the practice of direct file. and transferring youth to the adult system. I have dedicated my life's work to reforming laws that impact youth charged with serious offenses, improving data collection and analysis to better understand the impact that our laws have on these youth, working with local courts and prosecutors to change local practices and reduce transfers of youth, raising public awareness of the harms, and working with communities most affected by harsh prosecutions of children to improve justice for all. So this week, the National Center for Youth Law, in collaboration with the Haywood Burns Institute and the Center on Juvenile Criminal Justice, published a report examining the prosecution of youth as adults in California, a report that I believe you all have before you. It documents variations by county in its use of direct file and its disproportionate impact on youth of color. We found that prosecutors are increasingly using direct file despite plummeting youth crime. Today, 80% of youth prosecuted in the adult system are placed there by a prosecutor. Despite a 55% drop in juvenile felony arrests, district attorneys report 23% more direct filings per capita in 2014 than in 2003. These opposing trends suggest there is no clear relationship between serious juvenile crime and the use of direct file. Also, the report found that racial and ethnic disparities have grown. While the rate of direct file is decreasing for white youth, it has increased for Black and Latino youth. For example, in 2003, Black youth were 4.5 times as likely as white youth to be direct filed, but in 2014, this figure rose to over 11 times as likely. Moreover, county-level disparities lead to an inequitable system of justice by geography. For example, Yuba and San Diego counties report identical rates of youth arrests for serious crime, but youth living in Yuba County are 34 times as likely to be directly filed than youth in San Diego County. Additionally, I regularly work inside prisons, providing legal services to people sentenced to lengthy and life prisons for crimes they committed as youth. Many of these youth were prosecuted in adult courts and charged with excessive sentencing enhancements at the sole discretion of a prosecutor. Meanwhile, the research clearly shows that these young people charged with serious offenses can learn from their mistakes and grow to become responsible adults if they're given the opportunity. Each time I visit these prisons, I am reminded that if it were not for direct file, thousands of these youth would have received a judicial transfer hearing and would have had an opportunity to remain in the juvenile system, to learn from their mistakes and grow to become responsible, productive adults, even become a lawyer like me. Alternatively, I'm also cognizant of the fact that had I been prosecuted under today's laws, I would likely have been direct filed. I would have been sentenced to serve decades in prison, and in short, I would not be sitting here before you today. I would like to impress upon you the sad reality. All kids make mistakes. Some kids make big mistakes and commit serious crimes. Common sense tells us the best way to deal with youth who make poor decisions is with guidance and education. The research confirms this, that rehabilitation is the most effective way to reduce recidivism and improve public safety. Meanwhile, direct file has become a system of justice by geography. Age and race and location of the person, rather than the seriousness of the offense, will determine the likelihood that he or she will be directly filed in the adult system and subjected to adult sentences. The practice of direct file and its stark racial and ethnic disparities highlights the need for more appropriate, effective, humane treatment of youth. Returning decision-making power to judges about which youth should be prosecuted in the adult system would introduce greater transparency and oversight into these decisions. By returning to a system of judicial discretion, Californians would reduce the high cost of unnecessary and harmful long-term incarceration of youth while improving public safety and expanding opportunities for adjudicated youth to engage in school, work, family, and community. I urge your support for the Public Safety and Rehabilitation Act of 2016. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Guzman.
Good morning, Chair Jones Sawyer, Chair Hancock, and committee members. My name is James Harrison. I'm one of the attorneys who helped to draft the measure, and I wanted to briefly describe to you the way in which the adult provisions of the measure would work. As you know, the goal of the measure is to protect and enhance public safety by focusing on rehabilitation and ending the revolving door of crime. The adult provisions of the measure attempt to accomplish this goal in two ways. First, the measure authorizes parole consideration after a nonviolent offender serves the full term for his or her primary offense. as the California Supreme Court confirmed in its opinion, which was issued on Monday, rejecting the California District Attorneys Association's challenge to the measure. This provision applies only to state prisoners convicted of nonviolent felonies. Second, the measure authorizes CDCR to award credits for rehabilitative and educational accomplishments and for good behavior. It's important to recognize that this is not new. For the past 18 months, the state has been implementing a federal court order which provides that inmates convicted of nonviolent second strike offenses are eligible for parole consideration after completing 50% of their sentence. This measure mirrors that federal court order. The order excludes inmates convicted of violent offenses, sex offenses, and inmates who have recently engaged in serious misconduct in prison. Second, under the federal court order, the parole board, which is composed of experienced law enforcement experts, carefully review the record of an inmate and determine whether that inmate has been sufficiently rehabilitated that he or she can be safely released into society. We expect that CDCR, assuming the measure is approved by the voters, when it implements the measure, will adopt these public safety screens and the careful consideration of parole eligibility as part of the regulations it's charged with adopting under the measure. What is new about this measure is the focus on rehabilitation. This measure would enhance the opportunities for state prisoners to rehabilitate themselves, and it would incentivize them to better themselves so that when they are released into society, whenever that is, that they're ready to reintegrate, rather than to continue to face the prospect that a federal court could order the indiscriminate release of state prisoners. This measure attempts to find a durable solution to that problem by adopting a parole and credit scheme that's already in effect and requiring CDCR to implement these provisions through the Administrative Procedure Act, a public process in which all stakeholders will have an opportunity to participate, experts, legislature, members of the public, and adopt regulations that are consistent with the goal of enhancing and protecting public safety, something that the Secretary is required to certify upon adoption of the regulations. These inmates are all eventually going to be released into the community. This measure is intended to enhance public safety by creating incentives for themselves to better themselves so they can be reintegrated into society. Now I'd like to turn the table over to Chief Mary Butler, the Chief Probation Officer of Napa County, to give a practical perspective on the importance of rehabilitation. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Chairwoman Hancock and Chairman Jones Sawyer, for allowing me to be here today to talk about this really important issue. My name is Mary Butler. I'm the Chief Probation Officer for Napa County. I'm also the President-elect of the Chief Probation Officers of California, and we represent the 59 chiefs in the state. I'd like to talk a little bit about the role of probation and really how that impacts, this initiative impacts the work we already do and why we feel so strongly that this is something that matches our mission. The mission of probation is really to assist public safety through both holding accountable the offenders that we supervise as well as trying to rehabilitate them. And those two have to go hand in hand. The California Penal Code describes probation as the linchpin of the criminal justice system. We're actually kind of proud of that title because it really does point out that we are involved in the criminal justice system at every step of the way. We supervise approximately 300,000 adult felons at various stages in the criminal justice system, pre-sentence all the way through sentencing. The juvenile correctional counselors and the probation officers are sworn peace officers. We are sworn to uphold the law and to protect the community in which we operate. Additionally, we are specifically trained, and as a critical part of our mission, we help offenders improve their lives. We look at a way of keeping our community safe through the offender services that we offer, because what we know is that with those appropriate evidence-based practices, we can help keep our community safe through reducing recidivism and putting offenders back on the streets as members of the community. They're actually giving something back instead of taking away. We also run the juvenile halls and camps. We are the ones that are housing those youth that are pending adult court, and many of those youth are in our facilities for very long periods of time. We supervise the juvenile offenders that are in the community. We oversee their rehabilitative programs, their education, monitoring that all their goals are met, as well as supervising the youth that do come out of the State Department of Juvenile Justice, a role previously held by state parole agents. We currently have that role. In short, we are peace officers, our role to protect the community, support the court, assist victims, and rehabilitate offenders. So I'm here to lend the Chief Probation Officer's support and testimony here today to the Public Safety and Rehabilitation Act, because as the experts on reducing recidivism, we know how incentivizing offenders actually makes a difference. When you can give them a reason to want to participate, it does actually get them to the chair, get them invested in their futures. We believe what's been laid out in this proposal has the framework for a foundation to build on, enhancing a better system for public safety. If we're really serious about reducing recidivism and lowering our prison population, we must have a system that implements what we know works. We have to use the correct programs for the correct people, done in adherence with best practices, and we know that these evidence-based programs are potentially the only way to really help public safety in reducing recidivism. In 2009, when SB 678 was implemented, probation really had the chance to show what we could do in working with offenders coming out while still holding them accountable. We were able to show that those rehabilitative services, along with the incentives and swift and certain sanctions, could provide a safer community and reduce the number of victims in our communities. We provided the opportunity and incentives for offenders to actually turn their lives around. If we had a continuum of programming and more incentives for them to take part in while in prison, by the time they reach our communities, they will have already had the groundwork in place to end the cycle of offending. That being said, it's not just any programming. Unscientific program that isn't proven to work isn't what we're encouraging. We strongly believe that what is working are quality evidence-based practices. Through years of study and research, both in science and in our day-to-day lives in practice, it has shown us that the evidence-based programs work to reduce recidivism, resulting in less victims and safer communities. By not utilizing these programs, we are being irresponsible with public safety by not doing everything within our power to protect our communities. There have been a number of studies done in this area. I'm not going to list you many of them, but I do want to point out that the National Institute of Corrections has done numerous studies that show that anywhere from 30 to 35% reduction in recidivism, if appropriately offered to the appropriate offenders, evidence-based programs. If we truly want to cut recidivism, lower our prison population, and not allow the arbitrary release of prisoners by a judge, then we have to have a system that from the beginning to the end gives offenders the time, opportunity, and incentive to participate in these evidence-based programs. The data clearly shows us that the offenders who do participate are less likely to reoffend. It also tells us that people coming out of prison that do not participate in these programs do offend and do tend to go back at fairly high rates. Doing nothing with them while in prison can create more victims and more costs to our prison system and to our communities at large in their safety. So really, this is ultimately about making informed decisions versus just releasing people arbitrarily. If we don't develop a system to incentivize people to want to program and want to change their behavior, we will run out of room for the more serious offenders and who may end up in our communities. So it's not really about early release, it's about earned release. And that is really important for us to have offenders have that opportunity to earn a release after their base term is served by working towards rehabilitative goals and then going to the parole board and actually proving to that parole board that they are prepared to be released. The evidence is clear that when offenders actively participate towards their rehabilitative goals, it reduces recidivism, making our communities safer and saves a lot of tax dollars. So in closing, I would just like to say from firsthand experience, we have been successful at seeing the evidence-based practices pay off. It is immeasurable in terms of our public safety in our communities, the value of helping getting productive members back into our community as opposed to sending offenders back to the community to reoffend. Evidence-based practices and programming is what works and should be the future of the California criminal justice system in order to create a functional correctional system while protecting the safety of our community. Thank you for giving me this opportunity today.
Thank you. Yes.
Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for allowing me to share my story and tell you why I'm in strong support of this ballot measure. My name is Dionne Wilson. I'm the survivor program.
Bring the mic a little closer.
I'm sorry. Is that better?
Yeah.
Okay, great. I'm the survivor program coordinator for Crime Survivors for Safety and Justice. And we're a network of 6,000 members across the state. My late husband was a police officer in San Leandro, killed in the line of duty. Irving Ramirez, the man who murdered him, is currently on death row in San Quentin prison. And I was not always an advocate for criminal justice reform. I was, like many victims, understandably angry. My trauma was unprocessed. I was raw, and I wanted vengeance. I used to think that the tough incarceration punishments were the only answer to crime. The more people we locked up, the safer we would be. But I didn't see that the system had already been operating like that for the past 20 years or 30 years. And that system that promised to protect me and my family and my community utterly failed us all. And through a tireless search for healing, I learned a lot about our current policies and how they contribute to the cycle of violence and undermine public safety. I realized that rehabilitation programs, had they been in place, to address the reasons why Irving was cycling in and out of the prison system, that he may not have shot my husband to death that night. I now advocate for policies that shift our focus from incarceration only to rehabilitation, policies that invest in the success of the people most likely to be impacted by violent crime instead of their failure. And I'm not alone. My organization conducted a survey of diverse California crime victims about their experiences and attitudes about criminal justice policy. And we found that 3 out of 4 victims believe that incarceration either makes prisoners better at committing crimes or has no effect at all. And that victims prefer investment into rehabilitation, mental health, and drug treatment 3-to-1 over incarceration. The reality is that people get out of prison every day, regardless of whether or not they're still locked in a criminal mindset. Prisoners are the true definition of a captive audience, and we have the opportunity to provide a means for them to step out of that way of thinking and change their lives, and we should take it. I believe that it's irresponsible to turn away from that opportunity. Every time we say no to rehabilitation, we say no to increasing public safety, the one thing that our criminal justice system is supposed to protect. Over the last 20 months, I've been working with a group of violent offenders inside San Quentin prison, and it has been the most eye-opening and powerful experience of my life. Before this work, I knew intellectually that, that rehabilitation was effective and that programming could work. But it wasn't until I watched it unfold in front of my eyes before I really woke up to it and saw the impact that it has. I've seen even the most cynical prisoners have realizations about why they committed the crimes that they did and who they are fundamentally as people. And they aren't now the people that they were when they committed these crimes. And it is thanks to those programs, this program that I've been a part of for the past 20 months, sitting with them, unpacking their childhood, understanding the effects of unresolved trauma on their lives, and then creating empathy for victims. That is what turns people around. When I sit there in that circle and work with them, and they still can't understand why I'm there, they don't get it. They don't get that what I want more than anything is for them to come home and be productive members of society, to give back, to repair the harm. And they're prepared to do that because of the programs that exist inside San Quentin. These results are nothing short of miraculous, and we need to continue this. Everyone knows that when people go to prison, they come out worse, and we have the opportunity to change that with this ballot measure. It stops warehousing and incentivizes rehabilitation. We can no longer afford to turn away from real solutions that change lives, reduce recidivism, and increase public safety. As a crime survivor who's been on both sides of this issue, I'm asking you to join us in creating change and support this measure. Thank you.
Thank you. Any members have any questions? Mr. Monty.
Thank you. I just want to thank all the panel members for your varied perspectives and some very personal perspectives, with the central focus being how do we do a better job of rehabilitation? How do we create opportunities and pathways? I'm curious if any of you have any information on a question I posed to the LAO of any data showing reduced violence inside either inmate on inmate or inmate on guard, where you have enhanced incentive programs that can lead to earlier parole.
I can't answer that for the prison population, but in terms of the local facilities that we run, juvenile facilities, you could probably hear from every single chief that would talk to you about how the services that occur within the juvenile facilities have reduced the number of incidents of both youth-on-youth violence and additionally youth-on-staff violence. The addition of the evidence-based programs helps them change their thinking, but it also gives them the ability to participate in other types of programming that they see as something that can make their time go by. So those incentives really make a difference in terms of how they view their time in custody.